My parents sued me because I refused to give my kidney to their so-called golden daughter. That was the line printed across the top of the summons I found taped to my apartment door, like some sick announcement that my own family had finally decided what I was worth. I remember standing there barefoot, coffee turning cold in my hand, realizing they truly believed I'd break, that I'd fold the moment they pushed hard enough. But they didn't know who I had become, not really. And what happened next, the part they never imagined, started with one simple truth I uncovered that changed everything. I grew up in a house where every hallway felt like it echoed my sister's name. Serena's trophies lined the shelves, her framed certificates hung in the living room. Her photos were the first thing anyone saw when they stepped inside. Mine were somewhere in a drawer, probably under old bills or holiday cards no one read. Even as a kid, I learned to walk quietly, to take up less space because anything louder than a whisper risked being compared to her brilliance. Dad used to say Serena was born shining. He never said what I was born as, just that I should try harder. Mom wasn't much better. She had this way of sighing when I entered a room like I had interrupted a show she was watching. If she hugged Serena, it was with both arms. With me, it was a distracted pat on the shoulder. There was a moment when I was 14 that never left me. I'd worked up the courage to tell them I felt invisible, that I didn't know how to be in a family that only made room for one daughter. Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. He just said I was jealous that Serena's success should inspire me, not bother me. Serena giggled softly, and Mom told me to stop being dramatic. That was the night I understood they weren't going to see me. Not then, not later. So, by the time I turned 29, I had created a small life of my own in Riverside, a one-bedroom apartment with warm, morning light shelves full of sketchbooks and a tiny balcony where I drank coffee before work. I didn't live far from my parents, but far enough to breathe. My freelance design projects kept me busy, and Daniel, my project manager, always made sure I had flexible deadlines when life got messy. Mila, my best friend since high school, was the one person who knew everything, the quiet bruises of being the forgotten daughter, the anger I swallowed, the boundaries I built just to stay sane. So when Mom called one Tuesday evening and said, "Your sister's in the hospital," all that distance collapsed at once. My stomach dropped. No matter how complicated things were, hearing Serena was sick shoved every old instinct to the surface. I rushed to the hospital that night, walking through hallways lit too brightly, wondering what I was about to face. I didn't know then that this was the beginning, the moment where everything I feared about my family would come true, just not in the way I expected. Serena looked smaller than I remembered, lying against crisp white sheets, her skin pale beneath harsh fluorescent lights. Mom hovered near the foot of the bed like a grieving saint, and Dad stood rigid beside her jaw-clenched arms, crossed as if anger alone could fix her kidneys. When I stepped in, both of them turned toward me with this strange mix of desperation and expectation. Not love, never love. More like they had been waiting for their missing puzzle piece to walk through the door. Dr. Hale entered a moment later, flipping through charts before speaking. "Serena's kidneys are failing. We've tested the family. Only one match came back." His eyes shifted to me. "It's you, Peyton." The room went quiet in that heavy, suffocating way I remembered from childhood when disappointment settled before the punishment. Dad didn't even blink. "So when can she schedule the surgery?" That was it. "No." "How are you holding up?" "No." "Do you need time?" Just a command tossed across the room like I was an assistant, not a daughter. I cleared my throat. "I haven't made any decisions yet. I need to understand the risks." Mom's expression hardened instantly. "Risks, Peyton. This is your sister's life." I know I said, though, my voice wavered. "That's why I need to talk to my doctor first." Dad's voice rose sharp enough to slice. Most people wouldn't hesitate a second. "She's your blood." The irony almost made me laugh. Blood never meant much in our house, not unless it belonged to Serena. Over the next few days, everything escalated. They called nonstop, left long voicemails about family duty, showed up outside my apartment unannounced. Mila sat with me one afternoon as I listened to Mom's latest message, her voice trembling, dramatic, dripping guilt. "If you love us, you'll do this. Don't make us beg. They thought you'd break. Mila said quietly. And she was right. My parents believed, like they always had, that if they pushed hard enough, guilt would bend me back into place. But the more they pushed, the more something inside me stiffened. I met with Dr. Rowan the next morning in his small office overlooking Riverside. He explained everything plainly. The surgery itself wasn't trivial. Recovery would take weeks. Long-term risks existed, especially if I ever faced kidney issues myself. Donation is generous, he said gently, but it must be voluntary and fully informed. No one should pressure you. Something clicked, then something sharp. Dr. Rowan, is dialysis still an option for her? He looked surprised. Yes, absolutely. In fact, we recommended it months ago. She didn't follow through. I blinked. She refused it. He nodded. Multiple appointments. That single truth hit harder than anything my parents had said. Serena wasn't dying tomorrow. She wasn't without options. They just wanted the fastest one, the most convenient one, me. I walked out of the clinic into the cool afternoon air, feeling unsteady but awake like I had been living underwater for years, and suddenly surfaced. And as my phone buzzed again, Dad's name lighting up the screen, I realized a turning point had arrived. Whether I answered or not, nothing would ever be the same. I didn't answer Dad's call. Not that day, not the next. Every missed call felt like a weight, but every time I let it ring, something inside me straightened like a spine, finally learning it didn't have to bow. Still, the silence didn't last long. 2 mornings later, there was a knock on my apartment door, firm, insistent. When I looked through the peephole, Mom stood in the hallway wearing what I privately called her serious conversation outfit, the kind she used whenever she wanted something big. I opened the door just enough to block her from stepping in. Mom, now's not. She slipped past me anyway. Peyton enough. We need to talk. She looked around my apartment with thinly veiled disappointment, as if the plant on my windowsill offended her. Then she turned to me with that soft, sweet voice she saved for manipulation. Honey, Serena is running out of time. You're her only hope. I took a slow breath. That's not what Dr. Rowan said. Dialysis is still viable. Her expression snapped like a rubber band. Dialysis is suffering. Why would you let your sister endure that when you could fix this now? Because it's my body, I said quietly, and I deserve to decide what happens to it. Her face tightened. You're being selfish. I almost laughed. For 29 years, I'd been anything but. I'd been careful, quiet, accommodating, invisible. If protecting my future meant being selfish, maybe I'd finally found my spine. I'm not donating, I said. Not now. Not without clarity. Not with this pressure. Her eyes went cold. If you walk away from this, don't expect to be part of this family. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard a frame tilted on my wall. I stood there staring at it, the crooked picture of a beach I'd drawn years ago, wondering if there was any version of this conversation where love had been part of the equation. Later that night, I sat on Mila's couch, knees pulled to my chest as she handed me tea. They're treating you like a resource, she said softly, not a daughter. They keep saying I'm her only hope, I whispered. But Serena refused treatment for months. That's on her, not you. I nodded, swallowing hard. I think I know what I have to do. The next morning, I went to the hospital alone. Serena was awake, scrolling on her phone. She looked up, eyes tired but sharp. So, did you come to tell me you'll do it? No, I said. I'm here to tell you I won't. Her jaw tightened. You're letting me die. No, I said. You're choosing not to fight for yourself. For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Fear, maybe. Or the realization that I wasn't bending. That was the moment I walked away. Out of her room, out of their expectations, out of the role they'd carved for me. I didn't know what came next. But I knew this. I wasn't breaking. The summons arrived 3 days after I walked out of Serena's hospital room. It was slipped under my apartment door sometime before sunrise, the corner catching on the rug. I almost stepped on it. At first, I thought it was a delivery notice or a flyer, but then I saw the county seal the bold type, my full name printed coldly across the top. My parents were suing me for emotional distress and reckless endangerment because I refused the surgery. I sat on the floor, legs numb, the world narrowing to the sound of my own breathing. There had always been a line between us, thin, frayed, but this was scissors cutting straight through whatever thread was left. Mila came over within minutes. She crouched beside me, skimming the document. "They're out of their minds," she whispered. "Completely gone." "They think I'll cave," I said, voice flat. "This is another tactic. Another push." "So, what are you going to do?" I exhaled slowly. "I'm going to fight." The next day, I met with Harper, a sharply observant attorney whose office overlooked a quiet street in Riverside. She read the complaint with one eyebrow arched, tapping her pen rhythmically. "They don't have a case," she said, "but they're counting on the pressure. They're counting on breaking you." She didn't know how eerily accurate that was. "We'll counter it, but you need to prepare. Court is slow, tiring, exposing. And your family seems to enjoy spectacle." She wasn't wrong. News spread faster than I ever imagined. Someone leaked parts of the lawsuit, maybe a neighbor, maybe a distant cousin who couldn't resist gossip. Headline after headline twisted the story: selfish daughter, dying sister, broken family. My inbox filled with strangers calling me heartless, cruel, ungrateful. A few clients backed out of ongoing design work, not wanting negative attention. But there were messages, too quiet, supportive ones from people who had lived through familial coercion. Those were the ones I held onto in the darker moments. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse buzzed like a hive. Cameras flashed outside. I walked in with Harper by my side, each step steadier than the last. I told myself the truth: I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the cure-all solution they wanted. I was a human being with a future worth protecting. My parents arrived moments later. Evelyn wore a pearl necklace I hadn't seen since Serena's high school awards night. Marcus walked with the stiff pride of a man who believed the world still bent to him. Serena, pale and wrapped in a blanket, followed behind, avoiding my eyes. When the judge entered, the courtroom settled. Harper began with calm clarity. "Your Honor, my client never agreed to surgery. She agreed to screening, nothing more. Organ donation must be voluntary." Their attorney painted a different picture, one dripping with melodrama, describing Serena as moments from death, claiming my refusal was cruel, calculated. The words didn't sting the way I expected. They felt cheap, like props. Then came the witnesses. Dr. Rowan spoke first, confirming the risks I faced. "Donation isn't a small request," he said firmly. "It's major surgery with lifelong consequences." My parents stared straight ahead, jaws locked. Next was Dr. Hale, Serena's nephrologist. He looked uncomfortable, glancing between the judge and Serena before speaking. "Serena's condition is serious," he began, "but not without treatment options. Dialysis was recommended months ago." The courtroom shifted, chairs creaked, someone sucked in a breath. Harper stepped forward. "And did she follow that treatment?" A long pause. "No," Dr. Hale said. "She refused dialysis multiple times." Evelyn gasped, placing a hand dramatically on her chest. Marcus muttered something under his breath. Serena stared at the table, her fingers trembling. The judge leaned forward. "Is it your medical opinion that the defendant is responsible for the plaintiff's decline?" Dr. Hale shook his head. "No. The decline is primarily the result of the untreated condition." A quiet shock rippled through the room. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Harper's voice cut through the tension. "Your Honor, this lawsuit is not about saving a life. It is about control. It is about demanding access to someone's body because they believe they're entitled to it." She glanced at me, nodding slightly. "My turn." I took the stand, palms damp but steady. "I didn't refuse out of cruelty," I said. "I refused because I was pressured into a decision I wasn't ready to make. Growing up, I was never seen not the way my sister was. Everything I did was background noise to her accomplishments. And now, when I finally set a boundary, they treated me like a traitor." My mother shot up from her seat. "That is not true." The judge slammed the gavel. "Sit down," I continued. "They thought I'd break. They always thought that. But I'm allowed to protect my health. I'm allowed to say no, and I won't apologize for that." The silence afterward was heavier than any accusation. When closing statements ended, the judge took her time reviewing the evidence. My parents sat stiffly, Serena's eyes glassy, unfocused. I stared at the floor, bracing myself. Finally, the judge spoke. This case has no legal merit. Organ donation cannot be compelled. The plaintiffs acted out of emotional coercion, not lawful reasoning. The lawsuit is dismissed. The plaintiffs will cover all legal fees." Evelyn gasped again, but this time it was real sharp guttural. Marcus went pale. Serena leaned back, blinking hard, as if the world had tilted. Everything stilled. Then the room erupted murmurs, shuffling the metallic snap of a journalist's camera. I stayed seated, letting the verdict settle over me like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. Outside, Harper squeezed my shoulder. "You did it." I watched my parents step into a storm of reporters' faces twisted with fear and humiliation. Their perfect image, polished for years, cracked wide in public view. They couldn't control the story anymore. Couldn't control me. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. In the weeks after the verdict, the noise around the case didn't disappear, it shifted. The headlines stopped calling me selfish. Neighbors who once avoided me in the elevator now offered quiet nods, a few even mumbling apologies. My clients slowly returned, and new ones reached out saying they admired how I'd stood my ground. But the biggest change wasn't public. It was the silence coming from my parents' house in Riverside. Their perfect facade cracked fast. Organizations they volunteered with quietly distanced themselves. Friends stopped showing up. People whispered about elder pressure manipulation and the truth that had surfaced in court. For the first time, the golden glow around Serena dimmed, replaced by something harsher: accountability. One afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox with Serena's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. She apologized not just for the lawsuit, but for years of being the center of everything while I faded behind her. She wrote about therapy, about confronting how she'd spent her life expecting the world to bend. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't pretend we could go back. She just acknowledged the truth. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer, not ready to answer, but not ready to burn it either. I moved forward quietly, building a life that finally felt like mine. My studio grew, my friendships deepened, and the air around me felt lighter without the weight of expectations I never agreed to carry. Sometimes I think about the trial, about how saying one simple word, no, changed everything. If you've ever been pushed past your limits or told your worth depended on sacrifice, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments and subscribe if you want more stories just like this.